The air in the room felt thick that afternoon, like the kind of humidity that clings to your skin right before a storm breaks. I stood there in my pale blue maternity dress, the one with the soft lace around the collar that my husband, Tom, had picked out because he said it made my eyes sparkle. My hands rested on my swollen belly, feeling the gentle kicks of our little one inside, a reminder that life was about to change in the most beautiful way. But as I looked across the decorated living room streamers in soft pinks and blues dangling from the ceiling, a table laden with gifts wrapped in shiny paper, and that towering cake in the center, frosted with white buttercream and tiny fondant booties, I couldn't shake the unease twisting in my gut. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, was smiling as she sliced into it, her knife gliding through the layers with a precision that seemed almost too deliberate. "Here you go, dear," she said, handing me the first piece on a delicate china plate. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second, something cold flickered there, like a shadow passing over the sun. I took a bite, the sweetness exploding on my tongue, but then, a bitter aftertaste, sharp and unnatural. My vision blurred, and the room spun. That's when I knew my mother-in-law, the woman who'd welcomed me into her family with open arms, had tried to poison the cake at my own baby shower. It wasn't supposed to end like this. No, our story started so much simpler, back when everything felt right, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. But life has a way of unraveling threads you didn't even know were loose. Let me take you back to before the shadows crept in. When the world was still wrapped in that warm glow of new beginnings, Tom and I met in the most ordinary way. At a coffee shop downtown where the aroma of fresh ground beans mingled with the chatter of early morning commuters. I was 28 then, working as a graphic designer for a small firm, sketching logos and layouts on my tablet while sipping a caramel latte. He bumped into my table, spilling a few drops of his black coffee onto my napkin. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice deep and genuine, with that slight southern drawl that made my heart skip. He had kind eyes, the color of fresh earth after rain, and a smile that crinkled at the corners like he was always on the verge of a laugh. We talked for hours that day about everything and nothing, favorite books, the way the city lights looked at night, dreams we tucked away for later. By the end of it, he asked for my number, and I gave it without hesitation. That was the start. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, on a quiet evening walk along the riverbank where the water lapped gently against the stones. He got down on one knee, pulling out a simple gold ring with a tiny diamond that caught the fading sunlight. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady but his hands trembling just a little, "you make every day feel like home. Will you marry me?" Tears stung my eyes as I nodded, pulling him up into a hug that smelled of his cologne, woodsy and warm. Our wedding was small, just family and a few close friends, in a little chapel with stained glass windows that painted the floor in rainbows. I wore a white gown with flowing sleeves, and Tom looked so handsome in his suit, his tie a soft blue to match my bouquet of wildflowers. Evelyn was there, of course. Tom's mother, a widow since his father passed from a heart attack 5 years earlier. She was in her early 60s, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun and a wardrobe of pastel cardigans that gave her an air of quiet elegance. At the reception, she pulled me aside, her hand cool on my arm. "Welcome to the family, dear," she said, her smile warm but her eyes searching mine, as if measuring me up. "Tom's always been my rock. Take good care of him." There was a hint of something in her tone, possessive, maybe, but I brushed it off as a mother's natural worrying. After all, Tom was her only child, and they'd been close since his dad died. She lived just a few blocks away in the old family home, a cozy 2-story with a wraparound porch where she'd raised him. We'd visit her every Sunday for dinner, the table set with her famous pot roast, the meat so tender it fell apart under your fork, and mashed potatoes whipped with real butter. Our life together settled into a rhythm that felt comforting, like slipping into a well-worn sweater. We bought a modest house on the outskirts of town, with a backyard big enough for a swing set someday. I painted the walls in soft neutrals, hung curtains that fluttered in the breeze, and planted herbs in window boxes, basil and rosemary that filled the kitchen with their earthy scents when I brushed against them. Tom worked as an accountant, coming home each evening with his tie loosened and a kiss for me, his hands still warm from the drive. "How was your day, love?" he'd ask, wrapping his arms around me from behind as I stirred sauce on the stove. We'd eat dinner on the back patio when the weather was nice, watching the sun dip below the trees, the sky streaked in oranges and pinks. Evelyn was part of that rhythm too. She'd drop by and announced sometimes a Tupperware of cookies in hand chocolate chip, baked just a tad too long so the edges were crisp. "I thought you might like these," she'd say, her voice light, but her gaze would linger on the way Tom and I interacted, like she was noting every touch, every shared laugh. At first, it felt endearing, like having an extra mom around. My own parents lived across the country, so her presence filled a gap. She'd share stories about Tom's childhood, how he'd built forts in the living room with blankets and chairs, or the time he skinned his knee learning to ride a bike. "He was always so independent," she'd say, a fond smile on her lips. But sometimes her tone carried a wistful edge, as if those days were slipping away. When we found out I was pregnant, it was like the world burst into color. I'd been feeling off for weeks, tired, a bit queasy in the mornings, and a home test confirmed it with those 2 pink lines. Tom whooped with joy, lifting me off my feet in a gentle spin, his laughter echoing through the house. We told Evelyn over Sunday dinner, and her face lit up, her hands clasping together. "A grandbaby," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "Oh, Sarah, that's wonderful." She hugged me tightly, her perfume floral and overpowering, but her embrace felt sincere. From then on, she was even more involved, knitting tiny booties in soft yarn, suggesting names from old family trees, and insisting on hosting the baby shower. "Let me do this for you," she said one afternoon, sipping tea at our kitchen table, the steam curling up like whispers. "It's my gift to the family," I agreed, grateful for the help, especially as my belly grew and simple tasks like bending over became a chore. Ho's early months of pregnancy were a mix of wonder and discomfort. The baby kicked for the first time during a quiet evening on the couch, Tom and I watching an old movie, the flicker of the screen casting shadows on the walls. I gasped, placing his hand on my stomach, and we both felt that tiny flutter, like butterflies trapped inside. "Oh, little miracle," he murmured, his eyes wide with awe. Mornings brought nausea, the smell of coffee turning my stomach, but I'd sip ginger tea instead, the spicy warmth settling me. Work slowed down. I took on freelance projects from home, designing invitations and posters while propped up with pillows. Evelyn would call daily, her voice crackling over the line. "How are you feeling today, dear? Any cravings?" She'd bring over soups she'd made, chicken noodle with carrots sliced thin, the broth rich and savory. It felt like she was nesting right along with us. But looking back, there were tiny cracks, like hairline fractures in glass that you don't notice until the whole thing shatters. Evelyn's comments started to shift, subtle at first. During one visit, as I showed her the nursery we'd painted in pale yellow, with a crib assembled in the corner and stuffed animals lined up on the shelf, she touched the mobile hanging above little stars and moons twirling gently. "It's lovely," she said, but then added, "You know, Tom was such a handful as a baby. Colicky for months. I hope you're prepared for that." Her tone was casual, but there was an undercurrent, like a warning. I laughed it off, rubbing my belly. "We'll manage," I replied. Another time, over lunch sandwiches with fresh tomato slices that dripped juice down my chin, she asked about my family history. "Any issues? Health-wise?" Her eyes were sharp, probing. I mentioned my aunt's diabetes, nothing major, but she nodded slowly, as if filing it away. The planning for the baby shower brought more of those moments. Evelyn took charge, her notebook filled with lists, guest names, menu ideas, games like guessing the baby's due date. "We'll have it at my house," she declared. More space and the gardens in bloom. I appreciated it, especially since my energy was waning. But when I suggested a simple cake from the local bakery, she insisted on baking it herself. "Tradition," she said, her smile tight. "My mother did it for me, and I'll do it for you." There was no arguing. Her voice had that finality, like a door clicking shut. Tom shrugged when I mentioned it later, his hand on my shoulder. Mom's just excited. Sarah, let her have this. I nodded, pushing down the flicker of unease. After all, what harm could come from a cake? As the shower date approached, the house buzzed with anticipation. Invitations went out, cream-colored cards with embossed elephants, since we were keeping the gender a surprise. Friends and familyers fed, my sister flying in from out of state, her voice bubbly over the phone. I can't wait to spoil that niece or nephew. The gifts started arriving early, onesies in neutral greens, a stroller with all the bells and whistles. Evelyn called often to update me. I've ordered the balloons, helium ones that float just right. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine. But once, when I stopped by her house and announced to drop off some decorations, I found her in the kitchen, staring out the window, her hands idle on the counter. "Everything okay?" I asked, and she startled, turning with a forced smile. "Of course, dear." Just thinking about the family, her eyes darted to my belly, and for a moment, her expression was unreadable. Like clouds gathering on the horizon the day before the shower, I felt a strange twinge in my side. Nothing alarming, but enough to make me rest. Tom fussed over me, bringing tea and a blanket, his worrying lines deepening. "Call the doctor if it worsens," he said, kissing my forehead. Evelyn dropped by that evening with a sample of the frosting, smooth and sweet, on a spoon she handed me. "Taste test," she said, watching closely as I licked it. It was delicious, vanilla with a hint of almond. "Perfect," I told her, and she nodded, satisfied. But that night, as I lay in bed, the ceiling fan whirring softly above, I couldn't sleep. Something nagged at me, a whisper of doubt. Tom's breathing was even beside me, his arm draped over my waist protectively. I chalked it up to hormones, the way pregnancy amplified every emotion. The morning of the shower dawned bright, sunlight filtering through the curtains in golden shafts. I dressed carefully, the maternity dress hugging my curves, a necklace Tom had given me dangling against my chest, a silver locket with our wedding photo inside. We drove to Evelyn's house, the car filled with the scent of fresh flowers I'd picked up. Her porch was adorned with ribbons, and inside, the living room was transformed, tables covered in lace cloths, punch bowls sparkling with fruit slices floating on top. Guests arrived in waves, hugs and laughter filling the air. My sister squeezed me tight, her perfume familiar and comforting. "You look radiant," she whispered. Evelyn was the perfect hostess, gliding between groups, refilling glasses with a smile. "Sarah, come open this one," she'd say, handing me a gift, a soft blanket, a set of bottles. The games were lighthearted, guessing baby food flavors, the blindfolded ones making everyone giggle. But as the afternoon wore on, I noticed Evelyn glancing at the clock, her movements a bit sharper. "Time for cake," she announced finally, wheeling out the three-tiered masterpiece on a cart. It was beautiful, adorned with edible flowers and those tiny booties. The room would stand out as she lit a single candle on top. "Make a wish, dear," she said, her voice sweet, but her eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my skin prickle. She cut the first slice, the knife sinking in with a soft crunch, and plated it for me. "The mother-to-be gets the honor," she said, handing it over amid applause. I forked a bite, the frosting melting on my tongue, sweet at first, then that bitter edge, acrid and wrong. My throat tightened, a wave of nausea crashing over me. The room tilted, voices blurring into a hum. I dropped the plate, china shattering on the floor, and clutched my belly. "Something's wrong," I gasped, as darkness edged my vision. The last thing I remember clearly is Evelyn's face hovering above me, her mouth forming a perfect little O of surprise, except the surprise didn't reach her eyes. They were flat, almost satisfied, like someone watching a long-planned domino finally tip. Then the floor rushed up to meet me, and everything went black. I came to in the back of an ambulance, the siren a low wail that vibrated through my skull. Tom's hand gripped mine, his knuckles white. "Stay with me, Sarah. Just stay with me," his voice cracked on every word. The paramedic beside us was asking questions I couldn't answer. How much cake? How long since ingestion? Any allergies? All I could do was clutch my belly and pray the baby was still moving. A tiny kick answered, faint but there, and tears slipped hot down my temples into my hair. At the hospital, they pumped my stomach. The charcoal tasted like burnt earth, gritty and endless. They drew blood, ran scans, hooked me to monitors that beeped in frantic rhythm. Tom paced the curtain bay, his shoes squeaking on the linoleum. When the doctor finally stepped in, her face was calm but serious. We found traces of oleander in your system, enough to cause severe nausea, heart arrhythmia, possible miscarriage if left untreated. You're stable now, and the baby's heartbeat is strong, but we're keeping you overnight. Oleander. I knew the plant Evelyn grew thick hedges of it along her back fence, pink blossoms that smelled sweet in summer. I'd complimented them once. She'd smiled and said, pretty, aren't they? But every part is poison. Tom stopped pacing. Oleander. His voice was hollow. Mom's garden. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They let me go home the next morning with strict instructions, bed rest, hydration, follow-up ultrasound in 48 hours. The house felt different when we walked into quiet, the nursery door ajar like an accusation. Tom carried me over the threshold even though I could walk. He needed to feel useful. He tucked me into bed, kissed my forehead, and whispered, I'm going to Mom's. I need answers. His eyes were red-rimmed. The skin beneath them bruised with exhaustion and something darker, guilt, maybe? Or the first cracks of doubt in the woman who'd raised him. I must have dozed. Because the next thing I knew, the afternoon light had shifted to gold. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from my sister. Call me. Now I hit dial, my fingers still trembling. Sarah, she said the second she picked up. Evelyn just posted on Facebook a photo of the leftover cake with the caption, such a shame the party ended early. Hope everyone's feeling better soon. Smiley face emoji. People are commenting what happened. Is the baby okay? She's acting like nothing's wrong. I closed my eyes. The room smelled faintly of the lavender sachets I kept in the drawers, but underneath was the metallic tang of fear. She tried to kill my baby, I said. The words felt foreign, too big for my mouth. Silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. We're coming over. They arrived within the hour. My sister Jen, her husband Mark, and our cousin Lisa, who's a nurse and still had on her scrubs. Jen took one look at me and burst into tears. Lisa checked my vitals like it was second nature, her cool fingers on my wrist. Mark stood in the doorway, arms crossed, jaw tight. Tom's still at Evelyn's, he asked. I nodded. Jen sat on the edge of the bed and took my hand. What do you need, honey? Proof, I said. My voice didn't shake anymore. Something concrete. Hospital said oleander, but that's not enough for the police. They need source, intent. I need to know why. Lisa's eyes narrowed. Oleander leaves can be dried and ground fine, dissolves in buttercream if you know what you're doing. I've seen it in ERS. Usually accidental, kids eating the flowers. But this, she trailed off. Mark cracked his knuckles. We start at the house, quietly. Tom came home just after dusk, his face ashen. He smelled like Evelyn's kitchen vanilla and something sharper, chemical. He sat heavily on the bed and stared at his hands. She says you must have had food poisoning. Bad cream in the frosting? Maybe. She cried. Sarah said she'd never hurt the baby. His voice broke. She showed me the recipe, same one she used for my cousin's shower 10 years ago. I watched him. The man I loved, torn between the mother who'd bandaged his scraped knees and the wife carrying his child. Did you see the leftover cake? I asked. He nodded slowly. In the fridge, half eaten. She offered me a slice. He swallowed hard. I couldn't. Good, I said. Because that slice might still have evidence. His head snapped up. Evidence. I told him everything, the oleander, the doctor's words, the way Evelyn's eyes had looked when she handed me the plate. Tom listened without interrupting, his breathing shallow. When I finished, he stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening street. I don't want to believe it, he whispered. But I can't unsee it either. That night we didn't sleep. Tom sat in the nursery rocker, the one we'd assembled together while laughing over the confusing instructions, and stared at the empty crib. I lay in bed listening to the house settle pipes ticking, the fridge humming. Around 2 a.m. I heard him on the phone in the hallway, voice low. Mom, I need to come over tomorrow, early. Just us. A pause. No, Sarah's resting. I said just us. I pretended to be asleep when he slipped back under the covers. His side of the bed was cold. The next morning he left before I woke, kissing my cheek and murmuring, I'll fix this. I waited 10 minutes, then called Lisa. He's gone to her. We have a small window, Lisa, Jean, and Mark met me at Evelyn's back gate, the one that opened into the alley behind the oleander hedges. We wore gloves, carried evidence bags Lisa had swiped from the hospital. The air was thick with the flowers' cling perfume. Mark boosted Lisa over the fence first. She landed soft as a cat. Jean and I followed, my belly making it awkward, but not impossible. The kitchen door was unlocked. Evelyn never locked anything, said the neighborhood was safe. Inside, the house smelled like sugar and bleach. The cake sat on the counter under a glass dome, 3 slices missing. Lisa snapped photos with her phone, then carefully scraped frosting into a sterile container. Jean opened the fridge. Leftover punch, deviled eggs, and a Tupperware labeled frosting do not touch. Inside it was a pale yellow mixture that looked innocent. Lisa sealed a sample that we moved to the pantry. On the top shelf, behind bags of flour and sugar, was a small glass jar with dried green flakes. Lisa lifted it down, held it to the light. Oleander, she confirmed, voice grim. Crushed fine, she bagged it, labeled it with a Sharpie. That's when we heard the front door open, footsteps 2 sets. Tom's voice, tight, Mom, where's the recipe card you showed me? Evelyn's reply, syrupy, in the drawer by the stove, sweetheart. Why the urgency? We froze. Jen's eyes darted to the back door. Too far. Lisa pointed to the walk-in pantry. We slipped inside, pulling the door almost shut, hearts hammering. Through the crack, I saw Tom enter the kitchen, Evelyn behind him. He went straight to the drawer, pulled out a yellowed index card. His shoulders sagged. This says almond extract. Nothing about oleander. Evelyn laughed, light and tinkling. Of course not, silly. Why would it? Tom turned the card over. Blank, he looked up, and for the first time I saw steel in his eyes. Because Sarah almost lost our baby. Because the hospital found poison. Because I need the truth, Mom. Evelyn's smile faltered. She reached for him, but he stepped back. Tommy, you're upset. Let me make tea. No. His voice cut sharp. I looked up oleander poisoning last night. Symptoms match exactly. And I saw the jar in the pantry yesterday. You moved it higher after I left the kitchen. He opened the pantry door wider. We stood there. 3 women in gloves holding evidence, staring at the man we loved and the woman who tried to destroy us. Evelyn's face drained of color. For a moment, no one spoke. Then she straightened, smoothing her apron. You don't understand, she said, voice trembling but defiant. That baby'll take you away from me. You'll forget your mother, just like your father did when you were born. I can't lose you, Tommy. I won't. Tom's jaw clenched. You almost killed my wife, my child. That's not love, Mom. That's sickness. I stepped forward, the jar of crushed leaves in my hand. It ends now, Evelyn. She looked at me, really looked, and for the first time I saw fear. Real, raw fear. Sarah, please, no, I said. My voice was steady, the way it gets when you've already survived the worst. You don't get to plead. You get to explain to the police. Tom didn't stop me when I called 911. He stood beside me as the officers arrived, as they bagged the cake, the frosting, the jar. He held my hand while Evelyn was read her rights, her wrists in cuffs that looked too delicate for the crime. She didn't cry. She just kept murmuring, he's my boy, like a prayer that had lost its power. The next hour's blurred statements, more tests at the hospital to confirm the baby was truly safe. The ultrasound tech let us hear the heartbeat, fast and strong like a hummingbird. Tom rested his forehead against mine and sobbed without sound. Family arrived in waves. My sister never left my side. Tom's aunt, Evelyn's sister, showed up pale and shaking, whispering apologies though she'd done nothing wrong. The story spread through texts and calls. Did you hear? Evelyn tried to poison Sarah's baby shower cake. Some refused to believe it. Others remembered odd things. Evelyn's jealousy when Tom's cousin had her first child. The way she'd hoarded his baby photos after his dad died. Pieces fitting together like a grim puzzle. Evelyn was charged with attempted murder. The prosecutor, a sharp woman with kind eyes, explained that intent would be hard to prove beyond the oleander and her recorded words in the kitchen. Tom had started recording on his phone the moment he suspected. It was enough. Bail was set high. She couldn't make it. Tom didn't offer. The public consequence came fast and merciless. The local news picked it up. Mother-in-law poisons pregnant daughter-in-law's cake. Comments flooded social media. Outrage and disbelief. Evelyn's garden club disbanded. Neighbors left casseroles on our porch with notes. We're so sorry. We had no idea. Tom's firm gave him compassionate leave. Friends organized a meal train that lasted weeks. Through it all, I focused on the baby, on healing, on the fact that I was still here, still carrying this life. The bitterness lingered, but so did the sweetness. The way Tom now rubbed cocoa butter on my stretch marks every night, whispering to our child like it could hear his promises. The way my sister slept on our couch for a week, just to be close. The way the nursery, once a place of fear, became a sanctuary again. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. The weeks that followed were a storm we weathered one rain-soaked day at a time. Evelyn's arrest made the local headlines. A grainy photo of her in handcuffs splashed across the front page of the town paper, the kind you pick up at the diner counter with your morning coffee. Local woman charged in baby shower poisoning plot, it read, and below it, details that twisted my stomach. Even now, oleander from her garden, ground into the frosting, targeted at me because, as the article quoted from the police report, she feared losing her son to his growing family. Tom folded the paper without reading it fully, his coffee growing cold in its mug. I can't look at this, he said, voice rough like gravel under tires. The community reacted in waves, like ripples from a stone thrown in still water. First came the whispers at the grocery store, where the cashier I'd known for years avoided my eyes while scanning my prenatal vitamins. At church, where heads turned during the sermon, their gazes heavy with pity or judgment. Then the outright confrontations. Tom's cousin, a bubbly woman named Marie who'd been at the shower, called sobbing. How could Aunt Evia do this? We ate the cake too. Did she not care about us? Tom held the phone away from his ear, his face pale. I don't know, Marie. I just don't know. Evelyn's friends circled the wagons at first. A group of them from her bridge club showed up at our door one evening, casseroles in hand, tuna noodle with crushed potato chips on top, the smell turning my stomach. The leader, a stout woman named Gladys with tightly permed hair, thrust the dish at me. We're here for Evelyn, she said, her chin lifted. This must be a misunderstanding. She's not capable of ... double quote. She trailed off, glancing at my belly. I took the casserole politely, but Tom stepped forward, his arm around my waist. It's not a misunderstanding, he said firmly. The evidence is clear. Please leave, they huffed off, muttering about ungrateful children. But within days, the club disbanded. No one wanted the association. Work was harder for Tom. His firm was understanding at first. Emails of support, a basket of fruit delivered to the house with a card signed by the partners. But clients whispered. One pulled their account, citing family instability. Tom came home that day with his tie in his fist, shoulders slumped. They think I'm distracted, he said, sinking into the couch. I knelt beside him as best I could with my belly in the way, rubbing his back in slow circles. We'll get through this, I whispered. He nodded, but his eyes were distant, like he was seeing ghosts in the corners of the room. The trial date loomed, but Evelyn's lawyer pushed for a psych evaluation. Diminished capacity, they called it. Loneliness after losing her husband. Obsessive attachment to her son. The judge agreed, and she was transferred to a facility for observation. Tom visited once, coming back with red eyes and a headache that lasted days. "She's broken, Sarah," he said that night, staring at the ceiling as we lay in bed. "Keep saying she did it for us, for the family. But it's twisted." I held him close, feeling the baby shift between us. A reminder that our family was here, now, resilient. Social media amplified everything. Evelyn didn't have accounts, but the story spread anyway. Facebook groups for local moms buzzing with theories, some defending her as a grieving widow pushed too far, others calling for justice. One post went viral, a screenshot of the shower invitation next to the news article. Captioned, "When family turns fatal." Comments poured in. Hundreds of them strangers sharing their own in-law horror stories, offering prayers for the baby. I stayed off it mostly, but Jen monitored, forwarding the supportive ones. "Look at this," she'd say, showing me a message from a woman in another state. "You're strong. Don't let her steal your joy." The baby shower gift sat unopened in the garage for weeks, a pile of pastel-wrapped boxes that mocked us every time we pulled in the car. One rainy afternoon, I decided enough was enough. With Jen's help, we sorted them blankets, diapers, a rocking horse with a mane of soft yarn. Each unwrap felt like reclaiming a piece of normalcy. "This one's from Marie," Jean said, holding up a set of onesies printed with tiny elephants. I smiled, tracing the fabric. "We'll have our own shower," I told her. "Just us, no poison." We laughed, the sound light in the dim garage, rain pattering on the roof like applause. As my due date approached, the public eye shifted from scandal to sympathy. A local reporter reached out for an interview gently through a mutual friend. Tom and I discussed it over dinner, spaghetti twirled on forks, sauce simmering with garlic that filled the kitchen. "It could help," he said. "So we're moving on." I agreed, and the piece ran a week later. "From poison to promise, a family's road to healing." They quoted me saying, "Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's choosing peace for the future." The response was overwhelming. Cards in the mail. Donations to a baby fund someone started online. It felt like the community was wrapping us in a collective hug, making up for the betrayal. But consequences rippled inward too. Tom started therapy, sessions twice a week in a quiet office downtown where the waiting room had magazines from last year. He'd come home quieter, but lighter, like shedding old skin. Mom's love was conditional, he admitted one night, as we folded tiny clothes into drawers. Always about control. "I see that now," I nodded, sharing my own fears, how the poisoning had made me question trust, even in small things like a neighbor's offered cookie. We talked late into the nights, the lamp casting soft shadows on the walls, rebuilding our foundation word by word. Evelyn's evaluation came back, borderline personality traits, exacerbated by grief. The prosecutor offered a plea manslaughter attempt treatment instead of prison. She took it, had bowed in court, her silver hair loose for the first time I could remember. Tom testified briefly, his voice steady. "I love my mother, but actions have costs." The judge sentenced her to a secure facility, indefinite until doctors deemed her safe. As they led her away, she looked back at us, at Tom. "Really, and mothered, I'm sorry," he didn't respond. But later, in the car, he cried like a child. Great heaving sobs that shook the steering wheel. I drove us home, one hand on his knee, the other on my belly. Healing crept in quietly, like dawn after a long night. The baby arrived 2 weeks early, on a crisp morning when the leaves were turning gold outside the hospital window. Labor was intense, hours of contractions that gripped like vice, Tom's hand crushed in mine, nurses murmuring encouragement. When our daughter finally cried, slippery and perfect against my chest, the world narrowed to her tiny face, her fingers curling around mine. We named her Lily, after the flowers that bloomed clean and pure, untainted by poison. Tom held her first, tears streaming as he whispered, "You're safe, little one." Always safe. Life with the newborn was a blur of feedings and diapers, the house smelling of milk and baby powder. Jean stayed for the first month, rocking Lily through colicky nights so we could sleep. Friends visited with meals lasagna layered with cheese, salads crisp and fresh. No one mentioned Evelyn. It was an unspoken pact. Tom sent photos to the facility, neutral updates, Lily's first smile. No visits yet, that bridge would come later, if ever. I found my own peace in small rituals. Mornings in the nursery, sunlight filtering through the curtains, nursing Lily while the mobile spun stars above us. Afternoons walking the neighborhood, the stroller wheels humming on the sidewalk, neighbors waving with genuine smiles now. Evenings with Tom, sharing a glass of decaf tea on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the dusk. We made it, he'd say, his arm around me. And I'd nod, feeling the truth of it in my bones. The scar remained, faint, but there a wariness around family gatherings. A double check on ingredients in shared food. But it taught us to, boundaries are lifelines. Love without possession is true freedom. Evelyn's act, twisted as it was, forced us to forge something stronger. In the quiet moments, I'd whisper to Lily, family is what we build, not what we're given, and she'd coo back, innocent eyes wide, as if she understood. As the months passed, the story faded from public memory, replaced by new headlines, elections, weather events. We became just another family. Tom back at work, promotions coming his way. Me freelancing from home, designs flowing easier now. Lily grew first tooth, first steps, her laughter like bells in the house. We hosted our own gatherings, friends filling the living room with chatter. No shadows lingering. One day, a letter arrived from the facility. Evelyn's handwriting, neat as ever. I see now what I lost. Not just you, but myself. Working on it, Tom read it twice, then filed it away. Maybe someday, he said. I squeezed his hand. Healing isn't linear. It's a path with detours. But we were walking it together. Time has a way of softening edges, like water over stone, wearing down the sharp points until what's left is smooth, bearable. Lily turned 1 on a sunny spring day. Her cake store-bought this time, vanilla with strawberry filling smeared across her chubby cheeks as she clapped her hands in delight. We held the party in our backyard, balloons tied to the fence bobbing in the breeze, the air scented with blooming lilacs from the bush I'd planted the year before. Friends and family gathered, laughter mingling with the sizzle of burgers on the grill. Tom lifted Lily high, her giggles pealing like music, and for the first time in months, the weight on my chest lifted fully. No shadows hovered. Just light, pure and uncomplicated. Rebuilding wasn't about forgetting, it was about choosing what to carry forward. Tom and I attended couples counseling, a cozy office with overstuffed chairs and a therapist named Dr. Hell who listened without judgment. We'd sit there, hands linked, unpacking the layers, my fear of hidden dangers, his guilt over not seeing Evelyn's unraveling sooner. Trust is a muscle, Dr. Hell said in her soft voice, like wind through leaves. It strengthens with use. We practiced small things, like Tom handling all the grocery shopping without me double-checking labels, or me sharing vulnerabilities without bracing for betrayal. It worked, slowly. Our nights grew intimate again, not just physically, but emotionally, whispers in the dark about dreams we'd shelved, a family vacation to the beach, maybe another child someday. Lily became our anchor. Her first words, Mama, followed by Dada, filled the house with joy. We'd read to her every evening, board books with bright pictures, her tiny finger pointing at animals as Tom made silly sounds. The nursery, once a room of quiet dread, echoed with her laughter now. I returned to work part-time, designing from the home office while she napped, the click of my mouse syncing with the rhythm of her breaths over the baby monitor. Clients were kind, some even referencing the news story with gentle support. You're an inspiration. It felt odd at first, being seen as a survivor, but it empowered me. I started a blog anonymously, at first sharing stories of overcoming family toxicity. Comments flooded in. Your words helped me set boundaries with my own mill. It became a quiet mission, turning pain into purpose. Tom grappled with his mother's absence in his own way. He visited the facility twice that first year. Short sessions behind glass where Evelyn spoke of therapy breakthroughs, her voice muffled over the intercom. "I'm learning about attachment," she'd say, her eyes pleading. He nodded, shared updates on Lily without photos boundaries we'd agreed on. After each visit, he'd come home subdued, but we'd talk it out over tea at the kitchen table, steam rising like confessions. "She's changing," he said after the second one. But so have we. I didn't push. Forgiveness was his journey. Mine was acceptance that some wounds scar over, and that's okay. The community healed alongside us. Neighbors who'd once whispered now invited us to block parties. Kids playing tag in the street while adults shared stories around folding tables laden with potluck dishes. Marie, Tom's cousin, became a regular visitor, bringing toys for Lily and hugs that lingered. "And Evie's choices don't define us," she'd say, and we'd clink glasses in agreement. Even the media circle closed gently a follow-up article a year later. 1 year on, thriving after tragedy, we declined the interview. But the reporter respected it, focusing on general themes of resilience. The online fund had grown enough for a college starter for Lily. We donated the excess to a women's shelter, a quiet full circle. Challenges came, as they do. Lily's first fever hit hard, her cries piercing the night, and for a panicked moment, I flashed back to that bitter taste, the room spinning. Tom held me as I rocked her, thermometer beeping normal. "It's just a bug," he soothed. We got through it with pediatrician visits and cool cloths, emerging stronger. Holidays were bittersweet Thanksgiving without Evelyn's pot roast, but with new traditions, my sister's cranberry sauce, tart and bright, symbolizing fresh starts. Christmas saw us stringing lights on our own tree, Lily's eyes wide at the twinkling colors. No poison in the eggnog. Just warmth. As Lily grew into a toddler, her curls bouncing as she tottered across the living room, we expanded our world. A trip to the zoo, her pointing at elephants with squeals of delight. Playdates where she shared toys without fuss, teaching me about innate kindness. Tom got promoted, his confidence rebuilt, and we saved for that beach house dream, a small cottage where waves would lull us to sleep. I spoke at a local support group once, my voice steady as I shared, "Betrayal doesn't break you unless you let it. It can reshape you, stronger at the seams." Applause followed, but the real win was the woman who approached afterward, tears in her eyes. "Thank you. I needed that." Evelyn's letters continued, monthly now, filled with reflections. "I see the harm I caused." Working on amends, Tom responded sparingly. Neutral cards with photos finally included Lily's first birthday, her face lit by candlelight. "For closure," he said. "One day, perhaps supervised visits. But not yet. Healing demands time, like a garden after frost, tending the soil before new growth." Our marriage deepened in ways I hadn't imagined. Date nights resumed, simple dinners out, hands intertwined across the table, talking about everything from politics to Lily's latest antics. Intimacy returned, tender and trusting, bodies remembering what minds had feared. "I love you more now," Tom whispered one night, moonlight slanting through the blinds. Through the storm, I believed him, felt it in the quiet spaces between words. Looking back, the poisoning was a pivot point, a dark chapter that forced light. It taught us vigilance without paranoia, love without chains. Family isn't blood alone. It's the bonds we choose, nurture, protect. Lily, oblivious to the history, grew surrounded by that love. Grandparents via video from my side, aunts and uncles stepping in. She know the story someday, age appropriate, a lesson in resilience. Bad things happen, but good people rise. Peace settled like a soft blanket. Mornings with coffee steaming in mugs, Tom kissing us goodbye. Afternoons chasing Lily in the yard, grass tickling our feet. Evenings with stories and snuggles. The house felt full, not haunted. We'd survived not just the poison, but the aftermath. Stronger, wiser, whole.